All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Sigma360's webinar on open source intelligence and AI automation. We're really excited to explore how open source intelligence, or OSINT for short, can become much more efficient and effective through AI automation. So before we begin, I want to let you know that we will be recording today's session, and throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature, and we'll address as many questions as possible during the Q&A portion at the end of the session. Now, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. First, we have Phil Neiman, Senior Account Executive and Mid-Market Leader at Sigma360. Phil has led key sales initiatives with prominent RegTech companies, delivering specialized compliance solutions and strategic guidance. Also, we have Brett Manwari, Head of Advisory and Technology Services at Sigma360. Brett has previously led high-stakes regulatory engagements for the Federal Reserve. At Sigma360, he specializes in implementing and validating financial crime technologies for a wide range of clients. And finally, we're joined by a very special guest speaker, Jean Drouin. Jean is an AML investigator at Stack21 Solutions with over 28 years of experience in the DOJ and DEA. He specializes in international drug trafficking and money laundering investigations. Today, he's going to bring us insights on AI and compliance from an investigator's perspective. With that, let's get started. So I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm Bernice. I'm the product marketing lead here at Sigma360 as well. So to kick us off today, everyone, what trends and practices are you seeing across the industry right now when it comes to the topic of OSINT risk screening and compliance workflows?
Hey, Bernice, I'll take that one to start off. Thanks for the intro. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. As Bernice mentioned, I've been around for a little bit in this space from a technology perspective, implementing and executing on workflows to targeted investigations on behalf of federal regulators. What I'm seeing, and it hasn't changed too much, but with the advances in technology, we're finding some efficiencies. When you have large-scale teams, and I've managed teams up to 200 investigators, and you have multiple tooling to investigate some of your transactions or onboarding customers, you want to ensure that everybody is adhering to that workflow, to that desktop procedure. And when you have multiple tooling, it's incredibly hard to confirm that your downstream governance related to whatever AML vertical you're investigating is in alignment. And an example of that is, if you were to use a dirty word string as part of it within Google, as part of your due diligence, you have to evidence and ensure that everybody is using that same dirty word string. You have to evidence and ensure that everybody is looking at the output via open source research to the same level. And then lastly, from a governance component, you want to make sure that screenshots are saved. And, forget about if you want to make a change to your desktop procedure and you have a large scale team. My colleagues and I used to joke about it's the equivalent when you do make that change to turning the direction of an aircraft carrier. You have to, number one, make sure your desktop procedure is updated. Number two, make sure that all of those procedures are understood by the team. And then lastly, when reviewing output during QA, you want to make sure that everything that you spoke about and documented as part of your process is adhered to. And it's difficult, extremely difficult to manage, and there's better ways to do that now with technologies. Jean, with regards to OSINT screening and investigations, kind of piggybacking off what I said, what are some pain points that you deal with from your experiences coming from government to the public sector?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I came from 28 years of federal law enforcement, where I had classified and protected information at my fingertips. Usually it was just a matter of picking up the phone or obtaining a subpoena or a court order, and I'd be able to get the information that I needed. Once I retired and transitioned to the private sector, I lost all that access. Essentially, I was spoiled. And now I was limited to publicly available information. I soon learned that in order to be effective in my new job, I would need access to a broad spectrum of information in order to achieve a similar outcome. What I learned is that there's a lot of information out there and it's scattered and fragmented. Access to it can be difficult. Once you obtain the access, you then need to determine its credibility, its severity of risk, and then compile it in a structured manner that can be comprehended for analysis.
Yeah, that
Thank you.
makes sense. Thank you, Jean. And also, Brett, what you mentioned definitely sounds like something that compliance teams should be thinking about. And Jean, really appreciate you sharing your personal experience as well. Now, moving on to the topic of today, open source risk screening or OSINT. Why is OSINT a priority for institutions then? And also, what bad actors or bad links can be uncovered by OSINT in particular?
Thanks, Bernice. It's paramount when, assessing customer risk or counterparty risk. You need the tooling to look outward to identify who your parties are. It's super important when dealing with counterparties or jurisdictions for your customer base, because you want to confirm that you have coverage for that particular jurisdiction. I'll give you an example. If you have counterparties that are focused in a certain region, your tooling, your searches, your OSINT research has to align with that region. If you don't have that coverage, you potentially will have gaps. Another example that I've encountered in the past with investigations, and it kind of will dovetail into some of the stuff that I've learned from Jean working with him this past year. When dealing with entities, it's no longer surface level with regards to investigations. I used to tell investigators when I was onboarding them as part of large-scale teams to investigate particular transaction sets, you want to baseline by asking yourself if this transaction flow makes economic sense. You want to ask yourself if the customer you're looking at transacting with this counterparty in anywhere in Europe, sending X amount of dollars, X amount of times over this period of time, if that makes sense. Do they have an internet footprint? Does the internet footprint align with the value and volume of funds potentially being sent? But it's not enough anymore. You have to identify who, number one, your customer is, what industry they're in if you're dealing with an entity, but also who their associations are. We had a use case that I've worked on with Jean, and actually, learned a lot from him in doing that, where we had a company that on the surface looked established, had a great website. I could find some open source media on it. The customer was pretty vanilla. It seemed appropriate for them to be sending funds to this particular entity. But when we dug deeper, we looked at the particular counterparty and we saw associations, we saw associated risk. And in this one particular instance, we identified a notary had associated risk to the entity that on the surface looked clear. But then when you dig even deeper and you look at that notary, you identify that that particular party is associated to various sanctioned entities. Now, if you step back, what does this tell you? Surface level looked fine, but when you dig deeper with the appropriate tooling, if you have it, you have a completely different perspective of that entity. And the nexus for that entity is the notary and his or her associations to various bad actors. It's a completely different ballgame right now. Jean, I know you have some examples of our work together, and obviously from your work in the DEA. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, that's a good point, diving into these entities because it exposes a lot more risk that you wouldn't have found. I'll give you an example of that. this summer, August of 2025, we noticed that OFAC sanctioned 4 Mexican individuals and 13 entities related to a large timeshare fraud scheme. We wanted to make sure that our client at the time didn't have any exposure or risk associated to this. We knew that the Mexican CJ&G cartel was primarily responsible. And according to the FBI, between 2019 and 2023, approximately 6,000 U.S. victims lost nearly $300 million. In 2024, that figure was $50 million. We also learned that since 2023, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned more than 70 individuals and entities related to this fraud. So we decided to take a deeper look at each one of these persons and entities to find any potential risk to our client. Using the Sigma360 platform, we scrubbed each entity or shell company. There was various shell companies that were involved. And we identified all their affiliates, their shareholders, legal representatives, directors, public notaries. And by looking at each one of them, we were able to identify other bad actors. We identified other shell companies that were involved, but not necessarily sanctioned, but we knew they were involved. So we compiled this information, submitted it to our client, and then later helped them create a typology looking for this kind of risk. So that's one of the examples that I have for this. Yeah.
Thank you, Jean. That's a great example in how Sigma360 can be very helpful in uncovering bad actors. And also, thanks, Brett. That's a great overview of network risk and maybe a very compelling case on why we have to dig deeper on screening, not just staying on the surface level, but also looking at associated risk. Now, let's move on. From an investigator's perspective, then, what does the process itself of OSINT screening look like? And what do we need to pay attention to during it?
Sure. Whether we do a screening for a client or an enhanced due diligence investigation, we start by using the biggest investigative platform. For us, we use Sigma360. Once this platform does its work and combs through all the information, there's a lot of information out there, and then we start to focus on the flags that are presented to us by this scrub. From there, we take a deeper look into each flagged individual or entity, which may lead to more identifiable risks. So by using the platform, it eliminates a whole lot of work. It allows us to actually focus our efforts and our investigations on the red flagged entities. And from there, we find a lot more risk.
That makes a lot of sense. Brett, do you have any thoughts on the investigative process then, and what you feel how it could work and what it could look like?
Yeah. I was just talking to somebody this morning, and I said I normally don't use this expression. I said measure twice, cut once. You want to be prepared before you deploy a technology. Like I said earlier, you want to make sure that your coverages, jurisdictional coverages for the data set you have, are in alignment with your customer base and the transactions that they are conducting. You want to make sure the adverse media for a location is local to that particular customer or counterparty where they reside. You want to ensure that where you align, a new technology like Sigma with that brings together and summarizes all of the potential OSINT information in one space, is positioned in a proper vertical within your AML program, whether it's onboarding, EDD, or transaction monitoring. And the one thing, it doesn't have to be complicated. You could rely on your desktop procedure to make this update and align it directly with output. You could get efficient and align it directly with a process via integration, real integration. And then you can streamline the output, and you can prioritize by risk. But the main thing is to test it before you go live. And we do that typically with clients via proof of concept. But in-house during implementation, you want to make sure ultimately, if you're responsible for this, you got to ask yourself, are my mitigating controls really reducing my risk? And to do that, you need data that isn't static. You need data that is being updated continuously. You need data that is pivoting with emerging risks and red flags. And then we touched on it, Jean and I did already. You need to really ask yourself, am I assessing network risk or am I assessing only surface risk? And if you're only doing surface risk, you got to revisit this a little bit. And Phil later on will have some great examples when he shows us the UI. That's it right now, Bernice, but
Yeah,
appreciate
that
it.
definitely makes sense. Making sure that your data strategy is robust is for sure very important. And then also just going into the thought process of like, hey, are you flagging up different risks? Are you flagging up associations? Things like that. That's very important as well.
I agree.
So, then moving on to another topic, could you share some real world examples, maybe, in which OSINT has come in very handy during risk screening? For example, maybe OSINT identified risks that weren't flagged before, or it was a helpful addition during the investigative process.
Yeah, I can take this one, Bernice. Thank you all for your input. The reason I can take this one is because, well, part of being an account executive is you get to talk to a lot of different clients, and we go through, multiple testing phases and POCs. I do have a specific example that, we've received explicit approval to share this story with you all today from our client. But basically, we had one of our clients going through a proof of concept specifically of this product, right, of the open source investigation tool with Sigma360's. So they requested to screen a handful of organizations, but this one stood out particularly. So on the surface, when we screened that entity, there was no direct risk tied to the entity that they were onboarding. So from your typical sources, so no sanctions hits, no enforcement action connections, no negative news articles, no direct risk that could be found, like I said, from your typical screen data. So technically, if you were to just use those typical data sources, the entity looked clean, everything looked correct. Now, they wanted us to run the specific search on our OSINT tool because their analyst on their end had found some dirt on Google. Now, they spent quite some time finding this information, right, using a Google dirt string search. But when we ran OSINT, so our live web summary surfaced repeated references linking that entity to another company, direct connection, where multiple C-suite executives actually had been indicted for financial crimes. Now, the key point here is the specific entity's involvement. The entity itself wasn't accused of anything, right? But the affiliation materially changed the risk profile itself, right? We went from a completely clean organization to direct risk with financial crime and fraud. Now, not only did our live web summary search take milliseconds, but without this OSINT tool, the context here would have been completely missed.
Interesting.
Thank you, Phil. That's definitely a very good example of OSINT surfacing real risks that other tools might have missed on the way. So now let's move on to the role of AI within OSINT. So with all these benefits on the table, where can AI come in? How can it help the process of OSINT searches, and maybe what efficiencies does it bring to teams as well?
Yeah, I can take this one too, and maybe this is a good time to go and segue into our demo here and kind of show you all what it looks like. But I like to highlight this topic of AI. So this is where the conversation shifts from just gathering more data to using AI for better decisions, right? So AI here at Sigma360 isn't just about like just summarizing articles or risk profiles. It's embedded across our entire workflow. Now you're going to see some summarization here on our platform, but it is embedded throughout the workflow. We're going to walk through like I said, a brief demo. I think we're going to focus narrowly on the open source intelligent investigation and risk profile summarization, just to keep things concrete. But the reality is that our AI capabilities really go far beyond the limited environment here. So the important part to understand is how AI helps teams answer three main questions. Does this information matter, right? Is it relevant to you? How risky is the event itself? So in terms of critical risk and credibility, and how involved is the entity itself within that risk? So understanding the intent of the language behind the open source links or specific articles. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I think this is a good time to segue into what our OSINT platform can actually do. So let me go ahead and do that right now. Give me one moment while I, bear with me here while I share my screen. Go. Okay. Can everybody see this? I think we're good.
Yeah, we can see it, Phil.
Wonderful. Okay. Now, I want to keep everyone, aware that we're currently demoing a limited environment. Okay. So we actually, our product team worked tirelessly to bring up a separate environment from our entire, product suite, where we were able to focus on OSINT, but also the critical risks, right? Showing the critical risks like sanctions, PEPs, adverse media. So we're actually sharing, what we're sharing here is actually the environment of our free trial. We're going to be issuing a free trial of this platform to anyone that is interested in trying it out and using it. But I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is a limited environment, right? It is not a reflection of the entire configurability and customizable features that we have on this Sigma360 platform. So when you log into your free trial, if you were to use it, this is the first thing you'd see, and you can click on Start Search, and you can immediately start using the platform. It's extremely easy. A couple things to notice. Again, we're blocking a few points here, so monitoring is not accessible, but we're focused on the investigation piece, right? We're focused on the OSINT investigation, but also want to make sure that we're highlighting some critical risks as well. So we set indicators for sanctions, PEPs, adverse media, some state-owned entities, right? Addresses, enforcement actions, restricted entities, transparencies, and lines of business. We're also including in network indicators. So understanding the connections from entities to their UBOs, to other organizations, who ships from who receives from who, and specifically beneficial ownerships as well, connected to risk, right? So we're going to be able to highlight if there is a connection from one entity to the next, whether this first entity that you screen is essentially clean, right? But there's an association, just like my previous example, if there's an association to an entity that is not clean, right? So this is your network indicators. So again, you can actually configure your search a little bit here. You can actually, specify if this is a person, a company, a vessel, an aircraft, if there are specific aliases, or even in the case where you have an organization that is spelled differently in another language, you can place those aliases in here to help narrow down your search. Countries, right? We cover global data. You can even add a birthday, a month, and a day for a birth year, a month, and a day for a specific individual. And if it's an entity organization and you have a registration date, you can actually put it in here as well. Okay, but for the purpose of this.
Sorry, Phil, just let me cut you off right there. We're not seeing anything move on your screen. Is it currently shared? Is the right one shared, or yeah?
Well, let's. What do you? Oh, that's good. Okay, what are you seeing right now?
It's the static screen right now. Yeah. If you could share the screen where your mouse is moving, that would be great.
Oh.
Phil, can you still hear us right now? I think Phil is frozen for a little bit.
He's navigating some
Apologies.
screens.
Yeah, he's probably gonna pop back in a little bit.
Any questions while we wait for Phil to figure out some technical difficulties?
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to just pop it into the Q&A chat here. We're going to be able to address them after the webinar or just right now. Oh, Phil is going to be back in a little bit. So, yeah.
Denise, we could probably move on to, while we're waiting for Phil, and we could always kind of table it when he comes back.
Yeah, definitely.
How, we could probably talk about how teams in-house can start implementing AI and some considerations to see if they're
Definitely.
candidates. All right.
Yeah,
So I was thinking
I'll
about that
move
one.
on to that. Yeah.
I'll take that if you want.
Yeah, that would
Sorry.
be great.
Yeah, apologies. Thanks for bearing with us. We're kind of pivoting on the fly here. But yeah, if you're, the thing about AI is that definition is different to everybody. Some people think AI is a magic potion that does all the work for you. It is not. If you're interested in AI for your shop, for your processes, for your AML program, I think the first logical question is to ask yourself when examining the different verticals within an AML program and open source research that you conduct is how many touch points do you have? If you're researching entities that are international, is part of your desktop procedure to update your word string, make sure you're aligned with some coverage that would give you some international coverage, look at articles, identify articles in incorporation for that jurisdiction. And when you realize how many different touch points you have, that's probably a good baseline to say, okay, I can explore AI. And the reason being is for this particular use case, when you water it down, AI, especially as it relates to OSINT research, as part of your investigations, could be a synthesizer of all these different touch points that you have. And why I truly appreciate that is because it simplifies, number one, your governance, because you can have pretty good assurance that everybody is aligned and doing the same thing. I remember in previous engagements, large scale engagements, when we would use dirt strings in Google to research for adverse media, we would have guidance on how far they look with the return. If there was no return, we would have guidance that they take a screenshot of that no return to evidence in their governance. And then conversely, there's a subjective nature of it for investigators with regards to them trying to identify what is interesting and what is not as it relates to a counterparty or a customer. And, the challenge when you're dealing in-house or managing a large-scale team with investigations is to make sure that everybody is of like mind. And we all know that's impossible. The proper tooling can get you in the right direction. The proper tooling that synthesizes a process and output that is reliable and verifiable can really mitigate your risk. And we can come back to that, Bernice. I was kind of filling some time while we were waiting for Phil.
Hi, everyone.
Glad you're back,
Sorry
sir.
about this. I'm back. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I apologize. My computer just decided to restart itself while in the middle of a demo. So I hope we can.
It happens. No worries.
It does. It happens.
Glad you can laugh about it.
Yeah. All right. I want to make sure that everybody can see my screen here. And apologize for the interruption. I'm moving my mouse, Bernie. So everything good?
Yeah, we see it.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So just want to start a little bit over again here. So again, this is the free trial environment, with a limited environment where you can search for specific risk. But again, we're focusing here on the open source investigations. You can click on Start Search. As I was explaining earlier, we've also included in this trial the direct risk indicators, right? Sanctions, PEPs, adverse media, state-owned entities, high-risk addresses, enforcement actions, indicators here in network, right? So as I was discussing earlier, we're not only just screening the entity itself, we're trying to find associated risks as well, right? So just like the example I mentioned earlier. So you can start your investigation here. In advanced search settings, you can add, person, company, vessel, aircrafts, aliases. Useful, like I said earlier, if you have an organization that is spelled differently in another language, you can place it here. And specific countries are coverage is global. I'll go ahead and just type in an entity while we're at it here. So if you were to, for example, use a risky example here. You can type in Drex Technologies, click on advanced, click on search here, and this is what it's doing right now. So it's summarizing the entire risk profile based on the indicators that we found. All right. So the initial search here, if you go into indicators, as it loads here. Now, it found direct connections to sanction hits, just like your search here, right? To this organization. It found country watch lists. It found connections to Panama Papers, specific enforcement actions, right? And connections to political exposure as well, and risky political exposure, as a matter of fact. But instead of going through, all of this, you can, and then looking at every single detail, you can just look at the summary, right? And create a report based on the findings. Again, our tool here is summarizing the risk it found and associating directly to Drex Technologies in this case. The second thing it's doing here is this is where OSINT comes in, okay? So we found the summarization for the direct risk we found on the indicators. But as an extra step, we are doing an open source intelligent investigation on Drex Technologies, and we're finding additional sources of information to come up with a risky profile summary, right? We found individual risks, and you can find your web links here. So let's say for a moment that I were to use our prior example. And again, like I said, we got explicit approval to use this example, but this is the story I was telling earlier. We are going to screen for prior to IPO. This is an organization that was essentially created to market the share, the sale of shares of privately held shares. And but what we found here is in the live web summary, we find a connection to a company called Late Stage Asset Management. That it typically in your normal screening search, right? The sanctions, PEPs, enforcement actions, you would find no direct risk in the matches, right? What we found, however, is through our OSINT search, a direct connection to this company called Late Stage Management. And Late Stage Management, and I think it's, if I can spell it here, Late Stage Asset Management here. See, and click on here. We're going to find direct risk, right, for direct ownership risk to Marcelo Fulano, that has been indicted, right? The organization has been indicted, and this is your direct risk association. So OSINT here was able to, understand the connection using the open source investigation to this company called Late Stage Asset Management and connecting it to direct risk, right? All right. Well, we can move on to our next topic here. Thank you all.
Thanks, Phil.
Awesome. Thank you for the very detailed demo, Phil. And this is a very good snapshot of what our Sigma360 platform can do within the limited trial environment. It's not really like what the full platform can do, but already we can definitely see there's returns on time, reduced review effort, especially with the help of AI summarizing and the links on the side for OSINT as well. Now, let's look at compliance from a broader lens. Where can AI provide the biggest lift also beyond OSINT searches? For example, maybe what are the main benefits of Gen AI, say, for compliance teams?
Yeah, I can take this one too, Bernice. So like I was hinting at earlier, we use AI across multiple processes within our search parameters here. So we use AI across ingestion, across entity resolution, across language interpretation, and risk scoring. So instead of dumping hundreds of articles on an analyst, let's say for a very noisy individual entity, our system is already doing the first pass of judgment based on the intent of the language used in the articles or source websites. So let me dive into this a little bit more. One of the biggest breakthroughs for us with our adverse media solution and our OSINT solution was separating material risk to entity risk involvement. So let me clarify this a little bit. So material risk or materiality risk answers, is this event severe or relevant for a financial crime or from a financial crime or reputational standpoint? And then the entity risk involvement answers, is this entity the actor, a close associate, or is this person just mentioned in passing? I'll give another story, another example. If you were to onboard an attorney, okay, this is someone using your services as a client, and he just happens to be an attorney. And this attorney happens to defend people who have committed financial crime, let's just say tax fraud, okay? And you're probably gonna, if you search his name in an adverse media search, you're probably gonna find connections, right, with his name on there, articles with this person's name associated with a risky article, like tax fraud and financial crime, right? What our system is able to do, right? Because we understand here that the attorney itself, he's a defending attorney. He's not the person involved in the crime. What our system can do is separate him from the article. Now, we can still alert you for it, but our system is going to score the material answers, right? Is this article materially risky? The answer is probably yes, but then also separate the entity involvement. So is this attorney directly associated with this article? In this case, right, using AI to understand the interpretation of the language, like the intent of the language behind the article, is key here. We are not just taking out keywords, we're actually reading the articles and understanding that we can separate this attorney from this very risky article. And then obviously, AI functionality is based on summarization, which we kind of touched on in the demo a little bit. So, but we do this correctly, right? So live web summary doesn't just say what happened, it explains why it matters, right? I gave the example of prior to IPO and late stage management. It's explaining that this matters because the entity is involved with a connection too, right? So why it matters, how the entity is involved, and what are the potential risk implications. And that's what turns OSINT into something, actually actionable.
Awesome. Really appreciate that very succinct overview of how risk materiality, entity risk happens within our platform and why they're important for risk teams and analysts as well. So let's wrap up our discussion today with insights that our audience can definitely bring with them. Brett, you did do a really good job of telling us how teams who are interested in AI can start with just getting it implemented in their compliance workflows as well. And so, Phil, I believe you have something to share as well about our free trial.
Yeah, I can get started with this. So the demo I was sharing earlier is a free trial environment. Okay, we're going to be issuing access to everyone that joined this call today. If you want to test it out, try it out, right? Put a few names in. Just to be clear, this is a limited environment, like I said, but there are no strings attached here. So no commitment. We're not capturing your credit card information, right? It's a 30-day trial with I believe 50 names that you can input into your own environment. We're not sharing data here. We're really just this is your own environment. Onboarding is very, very easy. So you'll be prompted when you click on the invitation link, you'll be prompted to book a meeting with me. I'll walk you through the environment so you're familiar with it, and also give you the opportunity to ask questions. But it takes about 30 minutes, 40 minutes to get you started. Like I said, it's a no strings attached environment that you can try out.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, definitely a no-risk environment, no obligations at all. I will be emailing a link to the Sigma360's 30-day free trial to you afterwards. So just keep a lookout for that in your inbox. Now, we've had some great questions come in from the audience, so we can dive into those now. The first question is, how quickly can teams expect to see efficiency gains with Live Web Summary?
Yeah, I can take this too. Like I said earlier, we've onboarded multiple different clients using this tool. So what we've seen is pretty much efficiency gains immediately. So let me give you an example. If today you're spending a few minutes per entity doing a manual Google search, let's just say it's part of your process. Now, that's one person, one entity. Multiply that by 50, 100 entities, right? That's hours of analyst time. So Live Web Summary surfaces all the relevant risk context up front, right? We're bringing up the articles or the links by critical risk, right? So ranking them by critical risk, but also credibility. So in many cases, teams are cutting down, review time from hours to minutes.
Great. Now we have time, I think, for one more question. Another question that came in is, how does Live Web Summary uncover deeper risks outside of typical sanctions, PEPs, and adverse media screening?
Yeah, so I can take this one too. So this is one of the most really underrated part of our Live Web Summary tool. So we're pulling sources like DOJ and FBI releases, regulatory enforcement sites, court documents, investigative journalism, even in some cases, community forums, threads, social media. Obviously, we vet that information up front and make sure that we're ranking by credibility and risk relevancy. And in some cases, customers were alerted of risk before enforcement actions took place, right, or became widely known. And that's the difference between, being reactive and being proactive. It's a process that your traditional screening tool just isn't built to do or isn't built for.
Hey, Bernice, one thing to add, and it's just from the perspective, and I think some of the audience or webinar attendees can appreciate this. There's no harder thing than trying to deploy a investigative process across many different people with multiple steps, multiple touch points for research. It's incredibly hard. You have to over communicate, but there is no assurance that everybody is doing what is needed to do to ultimately mitigate that risk. And you have to arm the investigators, you have to arm the employees and colleagues that are responsible for different verticals within an AML process, the tooling to do what is expected to mitigate the risk to where you work. And, fortunately, I've been around a little bit. I've seen a lot of tools. I'm fortunate enough to work at Sigma now. It's outside of being a data aggregator, an AI financial technology firm, it's a synthesizer of data to either mitigate or escalate, and it's incredibly efficient, and it's baselined. So if all your users are using it, there'll be some synergies and consistency across the board. And that's a value that isn't spoken about, but I'm super sensitive to it because I know those challenges.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that context, Brett, especially because you've worked those same challenges. You would know, how to get through it and how important it is, especially for the tooling to work the way it does. All right, I think there's quite a few more questions, so I think Phil, you can probably take a few of these because they're just with regards to our solution.
Sure.
Firstly, will these capabilities be available through API with regards to our free trial environment?
Okay, so on the free trial environment, it's a limited free trial, right? So API connection and onboarding isn't available in that specific environment. It's a limited environment. It's not, like I said, showing all of the Sigma360 capabilities. We're making sure that it's easy to use, but still helps you in your process, right? Uncover risks that you would have normally not uncovered through your typical screening tools. But to follow up on this, API connections are absolutely available through Sigma360. If you were to use API, if you need API connections in your process, this is absolutely something we can integrate with. We use open JSON APIs, REST APIs, very easy to integrate. We play very well with others, so not a problem for connecting your current workflows to a OSINT search tool or our entire suite of data.
Sorry, there was a clarification. It's not apparently for the free trial, also for when the solution is live. But yes, we can also do that. Yeah.
So yeah, so in our entire capabilities, yes, we can connect via API to multiple different workflows, multiple different platforms, and we can have we can table that discussion for how we would like to integrate with you.
Awesome. And then a few more questions. Is this a tool that works on top of existing tools like Dow Jones or FinScan, or does it have its own connections to these sources?
Great question. Love that. So we're our own data, right? So we are providing our own data solution. And now that, like I said earlier, doesn't mean that we don't play well with others. We play well with others. We typically, in the case that you're locked into an agreement with Dow Jones or FinScan, we can help you provide additional insights, right? So working on top of your existing tools so that you don't have to go out and use Google, right? So to answer your question, I think it comes into two prongs here. One, we can absolutely replace Dow Jones. Okay. The second thing is, do we work with them? No, we don't pull. We're not pulling data from Dow Jones or from FinScan. This is our own data, right? With multiple different partners and data sources, proprietary information. But we play well with others, like I said, and we can integrate into your core system as a layer on top.
Great. And then finally, there's another question about the tool. Is there a way to export and save a report?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in the free trial environment, we again, it's limited. So extracting reports and creating reports there is limited. So you won't have access to that in that free trial environment. But in our full platform, absolutely. We're big on paper trail, right? We're big on making sure that you can provide a legitimate answer to regulators for the decisions you've made and the screens you've done, right? So reports, exports, analytical features are all available in the Sigma360 platform.
Great. Yeah, so I think we are almost at time. So thank you all for your time today, and thank you everyone for your attendance. Again, we will be emailing a link to Sigma360's 30-day free trial to you afterwards, so please keep an eye out for it in your inbox. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our team, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.